All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us tonight. Today is Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. We'd like to welcome everybody to this Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. We do not have a need for a closed session, so we'll go ahead and start with our opening items. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just a few recognitions before I get started. Would like to acknowledge Janelle Rodriguez, the president of SLCSD, our Administrators Association. We have James Tobler, who's with us tonight, and Mike Harmon. Thank you for being here from SLEA. We have Whitney Favre from SLEOPA, Cindy Davis, who's part of our Transportation Local 6226. And then we have Elia Ocampo. I don't see her tonight. I'm sure she's watching with Buildings and Grounds. And then we have Tanya Slaughter with Child Nutrition, who's also joining. Hi, Tanya. There you are. It's nice to see you. Thanks for being here. I think we'll kick it off to the Pledge of Allegiance. We have Angela Bothwell going to lead us in that, and it's also her birthday.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry I got the birthdays mixed up. Thank you for bearing with me. We do have some recognitions this evening. The first one is the Utah Science of Reading Teacher Award. Dr. Hall, will you please join us up front and introduce this?
Angela, would you like to come up here with me? Thank you. All right. It's my pleasure to introduce Angela Bothwell, who is a teacher at Mary W. Jackson Elementary School. And not only is she a teacher there, but she is one of only 13 Utah educators that were recognized this year. This is teachers and principals both, that were recognized with Utah's first Science of Reading Instruction Award. And to do this, USBE created a level of implementation rubric, and this is all based off the letters training that teachers have been doing over all of this time. And to be recognized, they had to score 90% or higher in several observations using the Science of Reading Instruction, what do I want to say there? Strategies is the word I want, sorry. And this is, Ms. Bothwell's classroom is a tremendous asset in helping Utah and our district reach our goal of 70% of all third graders reading on grade level. And so one of 13, we'd really like to recognize you. That is tremendous. To think not only about doing all of that work, but then also to implement that work successfully. So, Angela, would you like to say anything?
Thank you. Yeah, I did start my Science of Reading journey about 10 years ago, and then I came to Salt Lake School District about 2 years ago, and I was really excited to participate in letters and just strengthen my routines with my class, and it was really fun to be recognized for my hard work and my student success. We saw a lot of success with my third graders this year.
Yes. Nice try.
There's a way.
No, you guys stay there. We need the pink.
Don't wash your feet.
Dude, I can zoom out, Alan. All right.
That was awesome.
Angela, congratulations.
Thank you, Angela. Congratulations. And now I'm just excited to call Alan Dude and get away with it. So. I've been calling him Dude for a while now, actually. Up next, we have the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching finalist.
And for this one, I'm going to introduce Holly McIntosh, who is our mathematics and MESA supervisor, and let her take this.
Good evening, board members. Welcome, Superintendent Grant. Thank you for your service, Superintendent Bates. Like Tiffany said, Holly McIntosh, I supervise mathematics here in the district, and thank you for the opportunity to share some really great news from the math world. One of our amazing teachers here in Salt Lake City School District has been selected to be among 5 finalists for the PAMPST Award in our nation's math and science world. From this group of 5 finalists, 2 will be selected to represent our state. Let me tell you a little bit about the PAIMST Award. It's the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. It is our nation's highest honor, big deal, for math and science teachers K-12. And it's a really interesting opportunity for teachers to become part of a network of national teachers that weigh in on policy and continue to develop the science of mathematics and science education. In addition, those awardees also receive a paid trip to Washington, D.C., a certificate signed by the president, and $10,000 from the National Science Foundation. Yeah, it is a big deal. Salt Lake City a school district has a long-standing tradition of our teachers being recognized as these finalists and also awardees. I think that speaks to the caliber of our math teachers. It also speaks to the collaborative nature of our district and a focus on continuous improvement. These teachers are not only experts in their content knowledge, but they also understand how to motivate students and how to help them achieve in those content areas. And these teachers bring great enthusiasm and motivation and encouragement to the field of mathematics and science. They offer a lot of expertise, not only to their classrooms, but to their profession. And that is certainly true of our West High math teacher, Todd Vaudry.
Thank you for recognizing me. This is a great honor, as Holly said. It is the premier award in all math and science education. I did used to work at the State Board of Education in the assessment department, and when I was considering coming back to the classroom, this actually was in the forefront of my mind, and one of the reasons why I chose Salt Lake City School District to come back to, because it is a great place to be a math teacher and make sure students are fundamentally learning, which is what this award is about. And I have had the privilege of teaching Salt Lake City students, including Lydia, at some point, and some of your children, in fact, and it's my honor to be a Salt Lake City School District teacher. So thank you.
We got to figure out how to get Alan in this picture.
I think we got it.
Dude.
Dude.
I get the theme song of Pink Panther.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, our third recognition tonight is the 2022-23 contract employees retiring from Salt Lake City School District and Utah Retirement Services. Dr. Bates?
I have the honor, I understand this is done each year, and the superintendent has the honor of reading the list of retirees. And so, as I practiced to try and trying to say these correctly earlier today, people on my cabinet kept saying, "Oh, ah." So you may have that same experience as I read these. Bruce Grubbs, Jean Hollister, Eileen Mishler, Jody Austin, Chris Stephenson, Anna Guerin, David Escobedo, Ruby Collins, Don Harris, Jody Molina, Ernest Wimberly, Timothy Williams, Ronald McKean, Barbara Pecoraro McDonald, Ruby Urbina, Lynn Lambros, Helen Vigil, Deborah Medina, Graciela Hernandez, Nicholas Bielacek, Elaine Turner, Carrie Bauman, Jerry Carr, Laura Angeweirden, Kaylin Dara, Karen Clayton, Jean Vander Tulen, Josie Wankier, Rebecca Hansen, Tammy Gibbons, Martine Savageau, Teresa Craycroft, Mary Jensen, Chris Gessland, Mark Martinez, Arlene Falkowski, June Vigil, Rena Rosenhan, Brenda Rhodes, Paul Schulte, Marina Coleman, Kent Thompson, Susan Raymond, Gina Cox, Ronnie Stubbs, Kim Perry, Barbara Stevens, Roger Haglund, Wendell Hurst, Tricia Holden, Rebecca Page, Rebecca Pittham, and Mark Catmull. Now, before we clap, let me say that's 3,047 years of experience that are retiring from us this year. I'm sure all of them are tuned in and have just heard me read their names, but in all sincerity, thank you, these folks who've worked with us for these many years.
Thank you, Superintendent Bates. Vice President Williams and I would like to go off script a little bit from the agenda and take some leadership privileges there. We have a couple of recognitions that we have to give that we didn't want to list because they're somewhat of a surprise. The first is for Lydia May, our student board member. Yep, it's that first one. Lydia has been with us for the last year, just graduated from West, and is on her way to Vanderbilt University. Lydia, we can't thank you enough for all of your contributions. You're a rock star. You say it like it is, you speak your truth, you speak your honesty, and I know all those things are going to serve you, Vanderbilt, and our world really, really well. So Lydia, thank you so much for joining us, and if you have anything to say, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing opportunity. I feel grateful to have gone to Salt Lake City schools my whole life. I feel like it's given me a good preparation for the world, and this experience has just been the best culmination of all my years in the district. I think we have in this district a lot of staff and faculty who care deeply about the communities and the children that they serve. And I think that guiding focus on kids and community is what sets this district apart. And so I'm really grateful for all of you and for the impact that this experience has had and for the district as a whole. So thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. You want to open that present? Maybe we could get that in the picture.
Oh, thank you. It's merch.
Oh.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lydia. And the next, also bittersweet, Dr. Martin W. Bates, who's filled in for the last 9 or so months as our interim superintendent. Really, really honored to have worked with you. Your reputation was quite magnificent and brilliant in the world of education here in Utah. And, you really did come in here and fulfilled everything that you said you were going to do, which was build solid relationships with us as a board, make sure that you built solid relationships with your cabinet, and in an effort really to work collectively as a district to bring some calm and some peace to our wonderful district in our capital city. Martin, we can't thank you enough for everything that you've done for us, and we do have a little gift for you as well.
And you have to open it now.
You do have to open it now.
Is it a tie with board member faces?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. It is.
I was going to put it on. Sorry, cabinet.
I wore it all day for that meeting. Have to put this one on here. Let's see if I can do this without a mirror.
It is kind of pink, too.
It matches some things that I'm seeing in the room. Oh, that's outstanding. You guys are incredible. While I'm putting this on, I would be pleased. All of the things that Lydia just said about the district, coming from her perspective as a student, I can sincerely echo, coming from the perspective of the superintendent, seeing it differently. The great people, the committed people, the wonderful kids and families. Is that tucked in? I don't want it sticking up behind. Can I tie a tie and talk at the same time?
We're going to find out.
The wonderful kids and families. I have said before, I'll say again, hang on.
And that's a clear no.
The cabinet, I had not expected to come and develop the deep relationships and deep feelings with the cabinet members and with board members that I have. I sincerely appreciate all of you, the relationships that we've developed here. I'm grateful for those and will cherish those in ways that I really hadn't expected when I started. I thought I'd come in and do the job and hold a place and take care of some things, but I've really come to care and appreciate all of you. I mean that sincerely, and I cannot thank you enough for this tie. You guys are great. Thank you so very much.
You're going to be able to get all of us in here?
Okay. That's just the board.
Alan, get your...
And I'm wearing my superintendent shirt too. So.
Look at that.
Come in, Alan.
My team.
Thank you, guys. All right, look at the last camera.
We take like a half step to the left. Okay. All right. Okay, 1, 2,
Ready to suck your stomachs in?
3.
One step ahead.
3. Perfect.
Thank you, you guys. Thank you very much.
Martin, I do have to say that was a very Mr. Rogers-esque moment there, so thank you for that.
I don't know that I could have tied my shoes while.
And along with the bittersweet in saying goodbye to folks who've served with us, and Lydia and Martin, we do also want to recognize and welcome Dr. Elizabeth Grant, who will be starting in her new role as Salt Lake City School District Superintendent tomorrow, but I believe that's at a conference for the next few days with the Utah School Superintendents Association. So,
But having attended a conference or two, I'm sure her phone will work and she'll be able to get emails and text and phone calls.
because Martin's, yours won't, right?
I deactivated my email about an hour ago, so if you sent something to me,
He won't respond. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, community, cabinet members, board, for participating in this last year, school year, and of course, just the recognitions this evening. It's an honor to serve with each and every one of you. Moving on to our consent agenda, I'm open to a motion to approve the consent agenda.
President Salazar, I move that we approve the consent agenda as is listed in the board agenda for today.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any discussion to the motion? Brian?
I do have just one question, and that was under the Classified Association Tentative Agreement. As I was reading through it, it had a provision that if there hadn't been agreement by June 15th, I'm hoping that there was agreement. Was there agreement?
Yes, there was agreement, and that language was added to the common agreement just as we hadn't spelled out the process if there were not agreement. So we just added that in there so we have a process to follow in the event that there is not agreement.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Any other discussion, questions? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes. Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Split, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you. And now we will move on to our reports section. Item number 1 is multi-tiered systems of support, SEL learning, and end-of-year update. Superintendent?
Emily, please.
I just stepped right up. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm grateful for the opportunity to just give some end-of-year information about MTSS and SEL and Safe Schools. It's something I've been doing all year. You'll remember I had a beginning-of-year report, a mid-year report, and this is the end-of-year report. So the first thing I want to mention is that for each of these topics, I do sort of talk about some potential next steps And I want you all to know that those next steps are aligned with the district's strategic plan. Just wanted you to know that up front. So starting with social and emotional learning, we are using 3 different programs and curricula to support our social and emotional learning instruction. One is Second Step, the other is Move This World, and the third is a program called Inner Explore. And we have an explicit expectation this year that schools offer 40 minutes of social and emotional learning instruction a week. And I find it, I had a meeting with our Inner Explore folks last week, and they had some really cool data to share that I thought was a good example of how much more we are doing SEL and mindfulness in our schools. Inner Explore is specifically a mindfulness program, just to clarify. So some data here is, you can see not all of our schools are using Inner Explore, but we have a number of them using it. And you can see here the orange dots represent our usage last year, our mindfulness usage last year, and the green bars is our usage this year. So you can see a big increase in how much mindfulness we are doing in the schools. And this chart I thought was also interesting. Over there on the left are the schools that are using Inner Explore. And you can see again the orange dots show how much they used the program last year and how much they're using it this year, with our top users clearly being Uinta and Highland Park. So you can see that the 40 minutes a week is really being shown through this data that we do have schools using SEL practices and mindfulness a lot more. Yes.
When I was looking at those, in the first chart, down at the bottom it says Google, Canvas, Clever.
Right.
I mean, I'm familiar with several of those.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks to me like most of the usage is coming through web apps. Is that what it is?
So we have all of our schools have logins, and they use it through the web. And those are just other ways that they can access Inner Explore.
So they can get to Inner Explore through Clever and other places
Yeah,
like that.
and we
Okay.
have folks who can train schools on how to do it that way. But we're not using it that way yet.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah.
What grade levels is Inner Explorer?
Inner Explore can be used K-12.
Okay.
And they're little 5 to 7 minute mindfulness exercises that are really like click and play, so they're very little prep for teachers. And the mindfulness practices change depending on the age of the kids and how much experience they might have with mindfulness. Okay. Also, we have a full year of SEL survey data now. So we gave the survey in the fall, and we gave it again in the spring. And our survey asks students to rate themselves on their own social emotional learning skills. So the questions are things like, I know how I feel and why, or I know what makes a good friend. And students answer always, sometimes, think about it, or never. And so you can see in these 5 competencies here how students scored themselves at the beginning of the year versus the end of year. And you can really see very stable scores across the entire year. The positive thing is that if you add up the average and the sometimes scores across all competencies, we're in the 83 to 92% range. A very high percentage of our students feel confident in their ability, in their skills in these areas. Our schools can dig into the data a little deeper to find areas where we may need some improvement, whether it's subgroups or grades or demographics where kids may be struggling with some of these skills, and we can offer Tier 2 and Tier 3 support at that point. When I first took this position 4 years ago, I started using the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, regularly as a resource. They're a gold standard in our country for SEL implementation. And they do have a district implementation rubric that's actually 4 smaller rubrics. And you can rate yourselves on where you are in the journey among lots of different criteria. So I've been reflecting on our implementation through that tool regularly over the past few years. And at the beginning of this year, you rate yourselves on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being like not implementing at all, and 4 being fully implemented. And so I rated myself on all the different criteria, and I thought that our district was about a 75% at the beginning of the school year. But I do feel like we've taken on some big challenges this year in rolling out our SEL, and that we're closer to an 80% now. So I think we're really growing on the journey, but we still have a lot to do in terms of a full-on rollout of social and emotional learning. So for potential next steps for social and emotional learning, I think one of the most important things is to start doing some SEL observations and walkthroughs to see how well we're implementing in our buildings. And so I've created an observation tool through KickUp, which is the new observation platform that Teaching and Learning is using. And it's a very simple walkthrough tool. It's about 3 questions. And district administrators or building administrators can use it to just gather some data on how the 3 signature practices are being implemented or what curricula is being used. And that feedback will go directly to the principals. So we can start collecting district data on, like, more specifically on how SEL is being implemented in the buildings and how schools are adhering to their own plans that they've written. So moving on to MTSS. And as a reminder, we reviewed some MTSS implementation data at mid-year. I showed you all some data from when our schools did the self-assessment of MTSS, and it gave us a really rich picture of where we are in MTSS implementation district-wide and at the school level as well. So I won't be going through that again, but we do have that data. I'm using the acronym BX to stand for our MTSS behavior specialists. So we have a team of 8 this year, which is up from our team of 4 that we've had. And our behavior specialists have offered a variety of professional learning, some of which we've collaborated with special education on, and some of which we've developed on our own. And a lot of those classes have been offered at schools or teachers' request. Our behavior specialists have served 246 individual students and teachers this school year. And just to clarify, those are specific referrals. So a student is struggling with their behavior, a behavior referral is written, and our behavior specialists get involved and support that student or that teacher. So these are individual behavior referrals or classroom management referrals that have come into our team. We've also, the team initiated 283 times they initiated coaching and professional learning contacts. So every time they reached out to a school to offer professional learning or coaching, they documented that. And there is a wide variety in the schools in terms of how often we reached out, and a lot of that had to do with how often we were responded to, right? If the dialogue continued, we kept reaching out. If it didn't, then we sort of took a hint and let the school do their own thing. But we reached out, I say we, but it was really the team. They reached out a lot to offer support. And then this chart shows how many times the schools reached out to us. They initiated the contact, and that was separate from when we initiated it. So the point here is to show how often we're interacting with the schools and their teams to provide support through professional learning, coaching, but also behavior referrals. This is the second year that we've gathered information from teachers on the teacher survey regarding how well they understand how to manage behaviors in their classrooms and how well they feel supported by the district. And so we wrote these 6 questions into the teacher survey last year, and then this is the second year they've taken this. And you can see there is a lot of growth in some areas, specifically on the fact that they know who their special ed consultant is, they know who their behavior specialist is, and there are some areas where I feel like we could definitely clarify what we can offer them in terms of behavior support. So I feel like we're starting to see the trends in these questions, and we'll be able to address those moving forward. And this box just says the whole purpose of this is to start gathering foundational data on where we are with addressing behaviors in our schools. So next steps for MTSS, there's a number of points here, but I'm just going to focus on the second one. I'd really like to continue to develop our behavior specialist team, and I'm gathering some additional data around how that role is perceived and used by our principals. And there's some very interesting things coming up that I think are easy issues for us to address to make the role as effective as it can be for our schools, and I'm sure we'll have that data for you in the future. And finally, student conduct and discipline are safe schools. As of June 8th, we had 101 total cases this year. Grade 8 had the most violations by far, followed by grade 10 and grade 7. We had 14 reoffenders. Those are students who either reoffended within the same year or from last year to this year. The 4 areas were equally represented, so it was really all over the district. Fighting and assault were our most common violations, and special education students made up 14% of cases, and students of color made up 81% of cases. So these are just some pieces of data from our cases this year. And I feel like one of the most important things we can do moving forward is continuing to develop our threat assessment teams and our threat assessment process, and making sure we have those teams up and running in our buildings, and also trying to lower that number of reoffenders by offering as much support as students move from a safe schools environment back to their neighborhood school. And that's it. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those or not.
Member Anderson?
So think about how all the pieces like fit together, behavior, safe schools, SEL. If the rate is stable at how students are self-reporting, it would be useful, I think, in the future to have some kind of data linked to an outcome other than their self-assessment. Because I'm wondering, are the tools actually effective if they're reporting the same? 80% still say, yes, I know how to make a friend, but is there actually any reduction in safe schools cases or reduction in behavior referrals based on the use of the tool? And if not, is the 40 minutes and the tool as important as the behavior team?
Yes.
I would say probably not, but I don't have all of the information. So that would be next step implementation, knowing that student self-assessment has stayed the same. Is the 40 minutes really the critical part, or is intervening for behaviors the more critical part?
So I totally agree, and that's actually one of my next steps. I just didn't mention it out loud, which is that I think we need to identify additional student outcomes linked to SEL in addition to the survey, because I agree with you, and I think we could probably start looking at attendance data. If students are really feeling supported and welcome in their buildings, then we would hope that attendance would improve, and behavior as well, which will require much more consistent and valid data from our log entry system, which Sam Quantz and I are collaborating on improving, and then communicating with teachers on how to do that. So I'm with you. I agree.
Awesome. Thank you.
Board Member Sweat?
Emily, thank you so much. I always look forward to your reports. I think it was in 2017-18 that we as a board decided, that SEL was going to be a goal along with reading. And I'm on the same page as Ashley is. I feel like, and I'm glad that you've put that in as a next step, because I think we need to have more quantifiable outcomes and really understand if we're moving the needle. So there's two questions that I want to ask. The first one is, I think that it's been interesting to me because of just incidences that have happened at the school. When a trauma happens at the school, something traumatic happens and it's school-wide. Can you walk us through what you think happens or should happen at the school to help kids feel safe, to calm down, to not go home and be afraid to come back the next day?
So I think that question is probably the very best for Mindy Holmdahl, because their team is the one that does a lot of that crisis response and has a better understanding of the mental health component behind that than I do. I do know that a lot of the SEL piece that I'm looking after is more of the tier 1 level of social and emotional learning, which it wouldn't necessarily be what you'd get from a crisis response.
Okay.
So I don't know that I can walk you through that, but I'm
Okay,
certain
so
she could.
the reason that I asked that is because as you think about that 40 minutes a week, that 10 minutes here, however they're working it on the school, that's a part of it.
Right.
I mean, that mindfulness that's happening with kids when they go through a trauma at the school, and let's say it's a school-wide trauma, is that something that through your expertise and through the things that you've tried to put in place, do you try and address that, or is it just everybody just keeps doing what they're doing every single day?
No, I think for sure, like the pieces that this addresses is sort of the building those defenses, building the immune system, if you will, right? Like the daily social mindfulness and how to deal with anxiety and things like that on just a regular world basis.
Right.
And then if there's a crisis, hopefully a lot of those things are in place and can help, but there's going to need to be additional interventions at that point.
Right.
That will probably come through counseling and things like that. And I think a lot of the programs that we use do have some tier 2 and tier 3 interventions and supports that can be used.
Right.
So they can be aligned with the more universal supports we offer as well. But like I said, in terms of the walkthrough, like when there's a true crisis, I think Mindy will be your best
Mindy would
person.
be the best person to do that. I think that, sometimes when you have the opportunity to talk to kids the very next day, or the very next morning, whatever it is that for us to be thinking about, as Ashley said, and that I've been thinking about those outcomes.
Right.
How do we tie that all together? So kids feel safe to come the next morning, that they don't have a problem with it. I'd actually like to ask Lydia, because, Lydia, I'd really like to know how you feel, that 40 minutes a week, is happening, especially at the high school level, where we see, more of the trauma come out. How do you feel like that's going? Are we on the right track?
So I think the Inner Explorer thing, like the reason I asked the grade levels is because I'd never heard of that. Like that program had never been offered to me. I think the way that, from my understanding, the way that the minutes of social emotional learning are implemented at West is the PAC class. And while I don't know if it's overwhelmingly popular with students, I think the concept behind it is really good. The idea that students have a teacher that they build a close relationship with that then ties them back into school and then keeps them engaged. But I think in some ways maybe it's a lack of teacher and student buy-in, which then makes it so it feels, I think sometimes in practice, more like a chore or something you just have to get through than something that people are really working towards. And I think partly that's the way that students are compelled to do it, or like a grade, or for writing a few paragraphs about a video we watch. But I feel there would be ways for it to be more meaningful. I don't know.
Lydia, I think that, I appreciate your candor and how honest you are about this, because this is something that we took on as a district that was important. And the student voice in all of this is important. And if it's not really making an impact with our students, then we need to make some adjustments. So I think that going forward, and I like looking at what you're talking about, Emily, with the next steps, but I think that somehow we have got to infuse that student voice into what we're doing to make sure that we are on track and that we really are addressing the needs and issues of the kids.
Yeah, so thank you, and that was very
Sorry,
very well spoken.
Oh, good. It was.
I hear you. That is actually another one of my next steps, is specifically to meet with secondary schools and talk about how they're using advisory, how they're implementing their SEL, and I would really recommend that all schools, regardless of the level, have some student voice on an implementation committee, so especially in high school and middle school, because I think from talking with students, my impression is that students understand the need for adults in their lives to address some of their struggles, like whether it's anxiety or just stress or whatever, even lower level issues. But are we hitting the mark exactly? No. And so I get it. And I think that we can do a better job of that, and we do need more student voice. But I do think students also see the need. So we just need to meet those two things, like what the need is and what we're trying to do, and we're like right here, right now. We just need to walk closer to each other on that, and we have to have students to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Bade? Oh.
You go.
I think that the student voice is critical. I also think the teacher voice is critical. And on that chart, it was hard for me to see it because you have the green block.
Yeah.
And I can't see the graphs and how the teachers are responding. So I'm going to share a teacher's perspective from a year ago in the classroom, okay? This is not high school, this is elementary school. And one of the things that I'm concerned about, so we've got the MTSS and the BX, but then we've got this SEL out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have children that really do have significant mental health issues, okay? I had a student that we had identified that had these sorts of challenges. How many, did you say you have 8 on your BX team now? Is that how many specialists there are?
Yes.
Okay. That's spread out over a lot of schools, okay?
Right.
With this particular child that I had, there could be incredible disruptions. So, Christy, when you're talking about safety, it's not just safety at the high school level.
Right.
Okay. The challenge that I was faced with was this behavior specialist would come in, he's observing, gives me a list of, I mean, truly 2 pages of like 132 things. And I'm really not exaggerating. Well, you know, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? I think it would be helpful if we streamlined or had some way, because for a teacher to try and accommodate all of those things before it gets moved to the next level, it's really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm working with this child. I know the child really well, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We've had our SELs. We're doing all of that stuff. I have to go to my collaboration meetings, okay? We have those every week where the teachers aren't in the classroom. They're with their administrator. Someone else is in the classroom. This child had an episode, went after another child with a pair of scissors, had to evacuate the classroom. I think that if I had been there, you know, I could have avoided that. But this other individual, I mean, they don't have the background as to what's the dynamics in this classroom and all of those things. First of all, it was really scary for the person that was in the classroom, and it was really scary for all of the children that were in the classroom. And what ended up happening is those children had to be taken to a safe classroom because you have to be careful in how you're dealing with that particular student. What I'm trying to say here is I hope that we're working on ways to expedite when, I mean, there are different levels of mental issues and challenges. And what I had been trying to explain that I could see happening as soon as this happened, okay, then it got escalated, and this child got the additional services that they needed and were moved to another school. But it's too bad that it took that to, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to say, okay, this collaborate with teaching and learning on academic, that's important too, because it's really hard to be teaching in your classroom when you've got those sorts of things going on and the anxiety that those children are dealing with. Of course, the next day in our SEL, we arranged it so that that student wasn't there, so that we could have a conversation about what the children had experienced, because many of them were afraid to come back to the classroom, and their parents were afraid to have them come back to the classroom. So, Christy, when you're saying this is something that you really embraced, I think that it's valuable, but we've got to really determine, is it accomplishing what we hope it's accomplishing?
Yes, and I think that there's two different things you're addressing there. One is our social emotional learning, which is how welcome do students feel at school, and how connected, and how are we helping students deal with, build their own social emotional learning capacities, even typical students. And the other issue is how are we responding when even our universal instruction is not working for a student, which is sort of the situation you're talking about. And that's, there are many, many factors that go with that in terms of that individual student and what all was happening. But I think that process from when we recognize that there's a problem and a student isn't responding to how we respond is something that as a district we definitely need to get better and more consistent at.
Okay. Thank you.
Board Member Bay?
Emily, thank you so much for this report. You know, the interesting thing about the mental health, it is something that's like always, hard to, pinpoint and see where to find a solution. It's not like a cut, we know, put a Band-Aid on that. But when it comes to mental health, it is much more complicated. And of course, there are so many contributing factors, in that. And it caught me off guard, and it's really a sad stat to see that 81% of the students of color are the ones who are, and then we have 14% of special ed students. And to me, us as a district, as big as it is, as a district that is, we pride ourselves in being a minority majority. These are the stats we should not be seeing here in our district. And I do not know what the solution is. I really do not have a solution. But one thing is, I am certain that, when a new superintendent comes in, we can't wait until we find some more bridges to be built with the city, hopefully to help us in making sure that those communities, they feel safe and they do not feel like, they're always on guard. And I'm speaking here from my own perspective as a Black person. I feel like I always have to work, 200%, so I'll be able to meet the expectations of being in a society where, it's just it's just, for me, that's what I feel, and I will always feel that way. And so when I think of these students, this happening to them, then we probably are running into the issue of inclusion, and also the issue of feeling that they belong. And when those two things are absent, those kids will always feel that they are defensive. They need to find a way to defend themselves. And I'm really hoping, that this is something, our kids are hurting. That's the sad reality. And not only our kids, their parents are hurting, and it makes it like a ripple effect, where it's like, parents are tired of dealing with this. They read so many books probably of dealing with this. I don't, But then you look at all of these things, I think we need to really focus our goal next year in making sure that these kiddos, when they enter the world out there, they are emotionally ready. We are not going to fix them 100%, but we can give them a little bit of tools to prepare them there. So, yeah, and I would love, like, next year when we have these stats, like for when we see here, students of color and special ed, would love to see, like, those students, what kind of, violations they did. Because that will help us, I'm sure it will help us, pinpoint, okay, if this is the majority of the violations that are taking place here, then there is a cause. And then, superintendent will have to run with that, of course, with the directions of the board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have all that data in terms of what every single violation was.
That would be great.
We have it all broken down, so we know exactly who did what. And, I tried to, for this presentation, pick out some highlights. And obviously, I might call that a low light, right? Like, that was definitely something that stood out to me. The 14% of special education students is actually a significant drop for us in safe schools violations. The students of color is not. That's been pretty steady, and that's definitely something we need to address. And I think the very first thing is just acknowledging the data and, like, defining the problem. And so I think that's exactly what we need to do, and then figure out some solutions.
Yeah, and please, we are here. We are here for those kiddos, and we want to make sure that these stats we're not seeing, these numbers, we can do better.
Yeah, I agree.
In our district with that.
Emily, thank you so much. And just to dovetail on what Board Member Bade and my colleagues here have mentioned, I'm also thinking about these statistics a lot on the significant safe schools data. Are grade 8, 7, and 10 also kind of the trend that we're seeing? It makes me wonder if we're utilizing these statistics in preparation for next year. Is there a chance that we might be targeting 6th graders in our elementary schools? I see these, and I am my own, kind of basic and not a whole lot of experience working with kiddos, but that transition from 6th to 7th grade is hard. I think that transition from 8th grade into 9th grade is really hard, and certainly, high school is what it is too, right? And I'm wondering if there are opportunities for us for next year into doing a little prevention, potentially with 6th graders and in middle schools in particular.
Yeah, the data definitely shows that, like, those middle years from about 12 to 15, 16 is where our biggest, like, by far, our biggest issues are. And now that we know that, we can, I agree, can we focus some, now that we know, and I've been taking this data for a few years, and it's almost always right, it's the same, right? About these 8th grade, these were pretty high. Yeah. But, like, overall, it's been in that range. And so I like the idea of targeting some prevention with that age group, because we rarely have things below or above those grades. I mean, we do, but they're not nearly as big.
Gotcha. Thank you. Board Member Sweat.
I think that, Emily, I sure hope that you know how much we appreciate the work that you have done, around this. And I think that, when we decided to take this on as a goal, it really resonated with so many people, not only on the board, within the district, but also in our schools. And we were one of very few school districts, right, that stepped out. And I know that you've had multiple schools call you and say, how did you do this? Where did you go? And so I just hope that we always continue to be that school district that leads out. That we are the ones that are willing to step out of the comfort zone at times and to be innovative and to try new things and to put resources where they need to be. So I hope you know how much we appreciate the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you. And I will congratulate you all, because I've done a lot of SEL things around the country, really. And having a school board that supports social and emotional learning and a board priority on social and emotional learning is cutting edge and has really allowed this work to move forward. And without the support of the board, I don't think we'd be moving the way we are. So you are out front, so thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Emily, thank you so much for the presentation and for laying the foundation, as you stated, and we're really looking forward to seeing all the work that you do in your new role.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 2 on our reports agenda is a review of the 2022-2023 department accomplishments. Superintendent Bates.
Thank you. If the executive directors would come up to the front. And we had a number of board members who expressed interest in hearing from us what we felt were some of our great accomplishments in this past school year. And so I asked each executive director if they'd look over the year and say, what are the 2 or 3 things that you are the proudest of, the things we've been able to undertake or tackle or do. And if there's overlap between a couple of departments, which we would probably hope there would be, but that reflects working together, that people could share an item. But I asked these 4 if they would come and just jump right in. Go ahead.
Yep. And I get to start because equity is at the beginning of the alphabet. Yeah, I always used to be last on the list, and now I'm always first. Before I get started, I want to publicly acknowledge and thank Emily for her leadership in SEL. As you know, she's moving on to a different position, but she's agreed to help with the transition with the new person coming in following her leadership. And so hopefully we'll see the next steps. And so a lot has happened. We have been trailblazers. We've been the model in our state and across the nation. And we were the first to have an SEL administrative position, because that's, again, not something it may be more common now, but not at the time that we did it. So thanks to the board for their support in that. So last board meeting, I already updated you on the equity piece, so I won't be rehashing that. You heard from Emily, a very in-depth description of all of the accomplishments there. So I'm going to focus on student services and counseling. And so this is coming from Mindy in particular, who can definitely share with you at another time the procedure for a crisis response and how she deals with that. So this year we had one of our counselors, Alyssa, I always forget, I want to say Elisa Stern-Kolb, counselor at Riley Elementary, selected as Wasatch Front Counselor of the Year, so yay. Awesome. Trauma-informed training, again, that's going to help with, understanding the trauma and the adverse childhood experiences that students come to our schools with across socioeconomic status, because it doesn't just affect, students in poverty. It affects across all economic areas. We have social workers, as you know, that have supported 443 students in individual sessions this year and 454 students in groups and in classroom sessions. Health services, nurses gave 1,793 flu shots at no cost to families, 1,441 immunizations. They trained 154 staff in CPR and vision screened 8,427 students. So a lot of great work. Healthcare plans are now on PowerSchool, making it significantly easier to move from one teacher to the next. And Sam, Mindy, thanks you and your team. So it says, thank you, Sam, Brian, and nurses. This was a huge lift. And stock Narcan is now in all schools, K-12. Stock albuterol for students with an asthma healthcare plan is also available in every school. Nursing services are available through the summer. And McKinney-Vento is serving over 700 students experiencing homelessness. And we have a lot more, but those are the highlights that I wanted to share with you tonight. So thank you.
From the Human Resource Services Department, it has been a very busy year. I just pulled up the latest numbers, and the HRS staff has managed over 13,000 applications over the last 18 months. So it's a substantial number, and definitely the HRS staff has been very busy. Our main highlights this last year, number one, we just conducted a comprehensive job study of all of our classified positions and all of our district office administrators. It's a total of 99 distinct positions that had to be reviewed for their job classification, their job descriptions, their salary, compensation. This was a real major undertaking for the HRS staff, so I want to give a shout out to all of them because it took a substantial amount of time working with our CISO as our provided vendor to help us with this, but it took an amazing amount of time from my staff, both on the front end and now that the job study is over, that we're going to now communicate out to people like our updated job descriptions and updated salaries, that the job study really, I want to give a shout out to the board as well, pointed out that our salaries are very competitive, and it demonstrates a history of sound compensation for our employees, making our employees very, not our employees, but our positions very competitive among the Wasatch Front. And so, and thanks to the board, we're going to remain there. I want to say that this is a major undertaking, that it was about 88% of our positions started at the above average rate, which is a huge deal for starting positions. And with the new salary schedules that were approved, we're going to be in even better shape to remain competitive in the years ahead. Number two highlight, we had a really positive negotiation session this year with all of our employee groups that we negotiate with. Some of the highlights there are significant salary increases to our employees to remain competitive, so I appreciate that. And thank you, board members, for approving those salary increases. And also, we had some significant changes to our SLEA written agreement, so thanks to Mike and James back there, and working with us to be able to help provide schools with opportunities to have more on-site professional development for teachers. They're at the school level that's directed by the principal. And that's going to be a major impact for our students in the long term, so that the students can benefit from professional development that's directed at the school level for what they really need there at the school. So that's a real huge win. And number three, I'd like to point out one thing that you haven't heard a lot about is substitutes. Due to some a major targeted focus in my office, as well as some changes to our hiring process, we maintained over an 80% average fill rate for the year in our substitute pool, and I hope to continue that trend in the year ahead. So some really positive things.
Thank you.
I am next. Close enough. Thank you. I want to share a few of our highlights over in the Communications Community Relations Department. So I'll start out with a couple of stats. So our social media following is something I'm proud of having increased this year. I was looking at stats from over the last 2 years, and from 2 years ago where we were, we've seen a 30% increase in our Facebook following. We've seen almost 45% increase in our Instagram following, 8% on Twitter. We focus a lot more on Facebook and Instagram, so I will give you that disclaimer. That's where the majority of our families are, whereas Twitter we use to communicate more with thought leaders, reporters, that sort of thing. But I'm really proud of that significant growth. A majority of our followers are women in the ages of 35 to 44, and one thing that really contributed to us being able to increase that reach this year is increasing the number of posts. I mean, wild, right? You post more, you increase your following. But in the fall, we started posting and standardized on school days, posting 2 to 3 posts as opposed to just 1 post per day like we were doing previously, and that really helped increase that growth. So I'm proud of that achievement, and also grateful to my colleagues here and at our schools for giving us really positive things to promote. That's another thing I'm happy to share. We had a lot of positive press conferences kicking off the beginning of our year. We started out in August with the UTA Bus Passes press conference. We had so much good coverage for that. We had a really great conference later in the fall for our sustainability initiative. I think that was one of the first events Dr. Bates attended with us in October. And that's a topic that's very nuanced, not a lot of people know about, but I know that's a priority to the board, and so we're working to make sure that we're messaging those accomplishments. The Backman Bridge, the Glendale Tract dedication, and all of these are initiatives that I have not spearheaded, but I'm happy to have really positive things to promote, and grateful to see that we are getting positive coverage for the really great things happening here in our school district. Another one I wanted to point out is our emergency communications, our school emergency communications when we have like a lockout or police activity in the neighborhood or a weapon on campus. I was looking again at the numbers of the emails going out, the response rates on those, and we are doing much better this year at getting information out during an emergency. Sometimes that's not possible. Things evolve quickly. The status changes quickly with police officers on site. So sometimes all we do get out is a recap, hey, this just happened, but we are working and doing what we can to get that out more and hoping that quickness in that communication, even if it's just a basic, hey, the school's on lockout, we'll share more info when we have it, but we wanted to let you know. We're hopeful that that's also helping us to build that trust and that relationship with our parents, and we're glad to see that improving. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is our community outreach. As a lot of you know, I think Board Member Bade pointed out even earlier in this meeting, our district is a majority minority. Most of our families are ethnic or racial minorities. So many of our families speak a language besides English in the home. And if you look at our language data from October 2022, which is the data we use for this school year, if you hit English and Spanish, you'll reach 93.7% of our families. Across the board, we have more than 80 languages that are spoken, and it's nearly impossible for every district communication to go out in all of those 80-plus languages. But we've really worked hard this year to set an expectation that bare minimum, things need to go out English and Spanish to the broader community. For example, we worked with architects this year, as you know, for feasibility studies on West High School and Highland High School. From the very first meeting with them, we let them know that our expectation was for them to provide PowerPoint presentations, materials, printed flyers, anything that they were going to produce for us. It had to be at least in English and Spanish. If the principals at those schools wanted those in other languages, we of course provided that. But from the vendor, the expectation was at least English and Spanish. When we had the community meetings at the schools and out and about, we made sure that we provided Spanish translation for everything, and of course by request for other languages. And I will let you know that we didn't have anybody use those translators in person, but as I was looking at the analytics on YouTube, because we did live stream in English, and we also, because we had that translator, we were able to provide a live stream in Spanish at the same time. And on YouTube, those meetings are still there. Patrons were able to access them and still can access those after the fact, and we had over 300 views on those meetings. So even though nobody came in person, we know that that's a service that our community is using, and something that we need to continue to set as the practice for our district, where we have so many families who speak other languages, and that being the major one. 93.7% isn't 100, but the baseline expectation that that's what we do is really important. And in working on those events for the feasibility study meetings, for the boundary study meetings, for pushing out the superintendent search survey, I'm also really grateful for the partnerships in the community. We extended our reach beyond what we've normally done, so we've worked with the neighborhood community councils. We asked SEC chairs to push information out. We worked with our PTA presidents. We worked with elected officials to plug us in their little newsletter or post us on their Instagram story if they had a minute, including some of you. Thank you, Board Member Anderson, for always pushing all our things. And I know that that's going to continue to grow and help us to reach parts of the community that we haven't previously been reaching. Those are some of the things I'm excited to share for this year.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So I was told I couldn't have a PowerPoint, so I just printed my slides.
Dr. Hall, I think that was just B.A. Kearsley that's not allowed to have a PowerPoint.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Since Ms. Chatwin was just talking about language, I think I will start with some celebrations that we've had in alternative language services. This year, we completed over 600 WIDA screeners, and that's a screener that's given to any student who enters our district indicating a language other than English on their home language survey. And that is more than any other recent year that we have information on. So 600, that's quite a few. This year, students exit WIDA when they demonstrate proficiency in English, and we have 159 students who exited WIDA. Now, right now, the state of Utah has one of the strictest WIDA reclassification levels of any state in the union, and the state has actually asked to have those statistics changed to be more online with what's happening nationally. If the proposed change is put through, we would have another 492 students who are reclassified for a total of 651 this year, which is very significant. Additionally, as we always want to support students in maintaining a heritage language, we had 225 students earn their seal of biliteracy as they graduated this year, and that is more than any other year we've ever had. So they have demonstrated that proficiency in English and at least one other language. So that was tremendous. We've also had over 400 students that have been screened and qualify for refugee services and are being supported by the district. So you're very right. We have a very diverse district. And I'm not going to hit every district and every person, so I hope my department's not watching, but these are some of the highlights. I'm going to go real fast. But in our English and Language Arts department, we had 473 educators that completed the letters certification in the science and reading instruction. Again, thank you to the board for allowing us to have those asynchronous days. I know you took a little heat for that, but it really improved the quality of our implementation, and we appreciate that. We have 126 educators who started it last year and will finish it next year using our own facilitators. And we were commended by the state for including many 4-6 teachers, paraprofessionals, and administrators that finished the whole thing in addition to our K-3 teachers. We also adopted a new set of elementary ELA materials and supplemental phonics materials that meet all of the requirements of SB 127. In math, we had 13 teachers that participated and finished our math endorsement. That's a 2-year program that the district sponsors. And we also adopted a new curriculum for 7-12 teachers. We have one in middle school and one in high school. So that's an exciting new change for our teachers to be implementing next year. In social studies, we've had an additional 7 inquiries published, and we'll have 10 published by this fall on the National C3 website. So these are high-quality inquiry units that we are using to change the way that we do social studies instruction so that we're using authentic sources and students are thinking and demonstrating those critical thinking skills. We have 25 elementary teachers who are participating next week in our Social Studies Elementary Standards Institute. And so this will be a great way for us to begin to really look at the quality of social studies instruction in elementary school. So we're grateful that they signed up. In the library, which you know is a favorite of mine, I want to say that we had 8 district teachers complete their 2-year endorsement. We had 340,134 books checked out of our libraries this year. We had 40,622 ebooks checked out of our libraries this year. So again, as always, thank you for making sure that we always have qualified teacher librarians in every one of our schools. I also wanted to remind us that we remain one of the state's highest districts for National Board Certified Teachers. We had 52 National Board Certified Teachers, 3 retired, so we're down to 49. 5 of those are administrators. That's 67 that we have had qualify as National Board Certified Teachers since then, and we have 18 teachers who are currently in the process. Really quickly, our early childhood is running 8 kindergarten readiness programs this summer, and we are opening a new program on the east side next year, which will be a lot of fun for us. Our ESL endorsement will graduate 90 teachers on July 1st. So every year, we're putting a significant number of our teachers through that ESL endorsement program. And then I'd like to end with our STEM ecosystem. I know you've had reports on that, but we were able to participate in the national conference this year. We took a team that included members of Teaching and Learning, members from the Salt Lake Education Foundation, and members from School Leadership and Performance as we put together a district-wide vision for math and science education across the board. So great progress in teaching and learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Superintendent?
Oh, thank you. Great work's been done. And it's a lot of people participated, but I'd like to thank these 4 for their leadership in moving this forward.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? Board Member Bate.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. It's really good actually to hear because this is very, very important. And I can't wait to see it, to actually put this in my social media because people need to hear about the progress and things that has been accomplished. And so one thing that caught my attention is in regards to the languages we use to communicate a message out there. And we know we do have a lot of refugees, a lot of refugee communities over here. And if we look in Africa, there is at least 42% of the countries in Africa, or actually 42% of the population in Africa speaks Arabic. And it is also a very large, percentage that speaks French. This is all because of the colonization. So there is that 89 languages that are spoken, but those are dialects. But there is also a major language that is spoken. The reason I am bringing this up is it is great we do have Spanish in there because we do have a very large Hispanic community here. But also, I am thinking about, those parents who are from those continents in Africa. They have a certain official language they do understand, and we can put it out there for them in English and Spanish. But then there is a little bit of, we are not going to be able to communicate things to them, appropriately if we're not putting it in at least another major language. In this case here, I go to French and I go to Arabic. And I assume that our district does have resources for that to happen. And if we do not, we are here, to work with the superintendent so we can make sure that that happens. And because it is, this is a country, it's a melting pot. It's a place of so many spoken languages. And in our district, we want to make sure that since we are minority majority, and we do have so many refugees communities, that they also see that their language is being involved. And I'm here to help in any way that I can. When it comes to Arabic or it comes to French or when it comes to a Berber spoken dialects in the southern, Sahara hemisphere or so, I am here to help in any way possible whatsoever because we want to make sure the message is reached out to them as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I should have probably explained this a little bit better. So our district has robust resources for translation, as Board Member Bate has mentioned. And so any patron who comes to our website can select the language in which they would like to view that.
Right.
At school level, there's also the options for translators for in-person events or meetings with administrators or teachers. When we send something out through School Messenger, meaning through email, through text, or through voicemail to our parents, we can also use the translation function there. The English and Spanish was the languages that we used for the live streams, and the bare minimum we asked for from our vendors. We did have translation into other languages that the principals were able to let us know what they wanted. I know also Bob in our translation department keeps a top 13 most used, or something like that, top 10, top 13.
Right. Okay.
And the languages you mentioned, I know are definitely on his list. So thank you for that reminder.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I am happy about the Spanish. We will continue to look for other ways to reach other populations because every one of them is important. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, as we talk about special, we never talked about American Sign Language. And, and we do have, I'm sure I would love down the road, we do have people who are can benefit from ASL, especially here in our board meetings. And again, as Christy said, we are always first at implementing new changes. And how amazing would that be? That we'd be one of the first boards in the whole state of Utah to introduce ASL in our board meetings or so. So I'm just, passionate about language and communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Any other questions or thoughts from the board? All right. Thank you so much for all the hard work and
Thank you.
moving on to our discussion agenda. The first item is the potential closure of Salt Lake Virtual Elementary. Superintendent Bates, would you like to introduce this?
Please, Logan and Tiffany, go ahead.
Absolutely. My first, okay. Well, we are glad to be back here to talk to you about Salt Lake Virtual. Sorry, it feels like I just sat down. Just as a little bit of background to remind us all where we started this journey together. During the year post-COVID, many of our families wanted an asynchronous learning opportunity for their students after we had come back after the year that we were out. And so we decided that we would roll a pilot project, and we created Salt Lake Virtual Elementary as a 2-year pilot. We were using that as ESSER funds, and we approved that to be a pilot to see what that would look like long-term in our district with students. It was given a school number, and because it had a school number and it's not a program, we do have to go through the closure process if we decide, based on enrollment, that this is a school that we would not be able to sustain financially over time. So during the first year, the enrollment in 21-22 was comparable to some of our larger elementary schools in the district. It was very diverse. It brought students in from across the district, and we had, at some points, over 300 students enrolled. However, as has happened with asynchronous programs across the state and across the nation, the second year, this year, 22-23, we see a dramatic decrease as students return to in-person schooling. And so we came to you at the required time to begin this conversation as we looked at the size and the scope of this program and its ongoing financial viability.
So as Tiffany mentioned, I want to go over a bit of the process and making sure that the entirety of this consideration is done properly and in accordance with both board policy and Utah State school closure process. The board has gone even more extensive than current statutory requirements. In considering the closing of the virtual school, that should say in consideration of the closing of the virtual school, the board has complied with these processes, and by April 15th of the 2022 school year, both the district notified all parents of enrolled students that the board was considering closing the virtual school, as well as notifying the Salt Lake City council members, as well as the office of the mayor of Salt Lake City of the potential closure. And those notifications went out in February of this year. The process continued, and the board has also provided opportunities for public comment on the proposed virtual elementary school at 2 public board meetings, both on May 2nd and May 16th. And just at our last board meeting 2 weeks ago, the board held a public hearing on the proposed closure and provided public notice of the hearing in accordance with state law. Back in March of 2021, March 21st of 2023, Tiffany and I were here to speak about this. We had done much research and even met with the principal of another online school in a neighboring district. And we proposed these 3 options that, we could maintain Salt Lake Virtual Elementary as a school. We could also, option number 2 was to create a program within one of our current schools to have a virtual option within one of our existing elementaries. And option 3 was to outsource services either to our neighbors at Utah Online School in Washington County or Rocky Peak Virtual Elementary in Jordan School District. So after considering all of this and doing the research and hearing public comment, our recommendations at this point are the following. Number 1 is to not continue with with the internal elementary online options beyond the 22-23 school year. Number 2 is to outsource online learning opportunities to a program in the state that best meets the needs of the student. And from our research, we would recommend that we provide information to parents about Rocky Peak Virtual Elementary in Jordan School District. Tiffany and I met with the principal there, and they are more than excited to have our students. They would welcome them with open arms at any time. So if families would like to attend that school, they're more than welcome to. And number 3, create a window for families enrolled in Salt Lake Virtual Elementary during the 22-23 school year to submit school choice applications for the 23-24 school year, the upcoming school year. Upon board approval, the window would open on June 26, 2023, and close on July 14, 2023. We'd also make sure that we would communicate that all students will be able to return in person to their Salt Lake City School District neighborhood schools whenever they choose. Those are our recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Appreciate the opportunity to hear from you. Superintendent, is there anything that you'd like to say before we start the discussion?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Board members, any questions? Vice President Williams.
Not necessarily a question, but something I'd like to share with the board and the district staff. So Ms. Moore and Principal Lim did invite the board to have the opportunity to come and observe and see what's happening in the classroom. I took advantage of that and was pleasantly surprised at what I found. And I don't think anyone debates this, but the learning that was happening there and the instruction that was happening was very impressive. Different modes and modalities to engage the students in the classroom. Just overall, it was a really positive experience, and I was happy that I had the opportunity to see that. We have a very big decision to make tonight, and I understand all the options and the recommendations that have been put forward. I think I've also looked a little bit into the Rocky Peak and what's offered in Jordan as well, and I think those are viable options as well. As I've been thinking about this for several months, and specifically the last couple of weeks, we have here, even on the slide, excellence and equity, every student, every classroom, every day. And as we continue to have the conversation here the next little bit, I would like us to consider the piece around equity for these particular students and the families. I'm gonna leave it at that, but just wanted to share where my brain is at and the opportunity I had with these folks. So thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Board Member Anderson.
To add to that, I would say that I, too, have been fortunate to supervise in a different job student teachers who are working at the virtual elementary and seeing the really robust opportunities that teachers have been able to offer and that the administrators offered. And I think one of the equity-based challenges in making this decision is it more equitable to allow students to be part of a virtual elementary where there's a critical mass and we don't have to consolidate faculty and classrooms versus, where they're in their home district. So my question would be, I know that students are able to return in person to their district school when they choose, or if they choose. And we've heard from a lot of families about how they can't necessarily make that choice due to complex medical needs or other kind of socially emotional needs. Has Rocky Peak talked at all about the way in which, programming could be accessible to students who might want to do those in-person opportunities? Are there ways we could still partner with neighborhood schools for them to do certain district programs that they want to do? There's just been a lot of concerns about that. So do you have any thoughts in kind of addressing the community question of access to the neighborhood school, knowing that returning in person might not be an option for everybody? Does that make sense?
Yeah, are you referring?
I think maybe you're asking about the potential for dual enrollment kinds of opportunities.
Correct.
Where students might be enrolled at Rocky Peak for all of the really well articulated synchronous but virtual the opportunities that folks have talked about, and yet be able to connect with activities at their neighborhood school.
Exactly.
I think that's something that can definitely be explored, that we would be able to. Dual enrollment is a consideration that's alive and well in our state.
Right.
And I think that would be something we would be able to support.
And I've done that. My kids were dually enrolled before they went back to school in person. They still did Battle of the Books, they did different activities, but they did everything else at home. So if they're, I'm curious about what the plan would be for communicating that to families as well, which might not be outlined here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and things like library services, students have made appointments to come in and use school libraries and to participate in those things, as well as the Battle of the Books, as you said. So depending on the decision the board makes tonight, I think that's something that we would be able to develop over the summer and make sure that all of our families knew.
Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to move this to the action agenda.
For the purpose of discussion, I move that we take the recommendation and move it to the action agenda.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any additional discussion to the motion? Seeing none, just to clarify, the motion is to move the potential closure of Salt Lake Virtual Elementary to the action agenda to further discussion. I'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion carries. Following our precedent, we will go ahead and jump into the action agenda for this particular topic. Is there a motion on the floor relative to Salt Lake Virtual Elementary?
So I just have
Please.
One quick question here. So I really, the dual, because we want to make sure the families are aware of how, for them to be completely informed on what's the next step, because that's one of the emails that I receive, which is, there is this problem, I have no idea how to deal with it. So, and I think the dual enrollment is really, really good thing. And I know families have listened to, to the meetings, they've seen the slides and I'm just wondering, if it is possible not to take action on this yet until like we have I don't know, something in there that just says, okay, to the families, this is what we have, this is what we have, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen, and especially mentions the part about the dual enrollment. And to me, there's just like, this is a hard decision to make, and we want to make sure that we are, looking at this also in terms of a lens of equity. And these are families who've been with our district for years and years and years. And we want to make sure that also have all the tools and, spelled out for them to be ready. And I think that will help us also, when we make a decision, we say, this is it. We got everything out there.
Thank you, Board Member Bate. I hear the sentiment, and yes, these are really, really difficult decisions. The only things that I have relative to potentially tabling the topic would be the 26th, the June 26th. And that's only present at one of the recommendations, and maybe Superintendent, you could clarify that. But, but I also worry about leaving folks hanging too.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about this extensively and trying to hear from folks for a number of months now. But I don't know, Superintendent, if you can answer the question about tabling this or not, but and how set we are on the June 26th date.
Part of the difficulty of the question is the complexity of the question, because we're dealing with a pilot that was approved for 2 years. The 2 years have passed, but because it has a school number, we can't just end the pilot. Pilots that land, they don't take off again, and so we've got a pilot that's landed, but it's got to still be in the air, and so we're trying to work through the law to bring the pilot to a close. And there are timelines that we need to meet that are statutory timelines that need to be met, and that makes today actually an important day.
Yeah.
Now, for that decision, for number one on the recommendation page, really what 2 and 3 are, 2 and 3 don't really require board action. Number one requires board action. 2 and 3 were our statement of these are things that if you do number one, then we would implement that with 2 and 3. Okay. But we're certainly open to you telling us we want you to do 2, we want you to do 3, and we'd also like you to do 4, which is to get this information out. And while we're at it, 5 and 6. I mean, maybe 4 would be good. But the idea is we need to make the decision. We need to make the decision tonight
Okay.
about will we have a Salt Lake Virtual Elementary School next year or not?
Okay.
And if we do, then we'll probably need to come back to you someone will need to come back to you in the next board meeting and talk about and get you to allocate FTE to that program and the numbers of students that we've shown you before. We talked about the combining of grades. So we would come back and tell you what that service pattern would look like. Excuse me, next year. If the answer is to close it, then we would move forward with these opportunities so that the families have as close to the same service, if not more opportunities under this different service pattern than they currently do. And so we'd be open for further direction on what you would like us to offer if there were things that you're valuing, such as communicating the dual enrollment option to parents along with these other communications. The nice thing about this population is it's a discrete and limited population. We know who everybody is, and we have all of their addresses, and we're the downside of the upside of the population being so small is that we know who everybody is and can get a hold of them.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope, does that answer?
Actually, that answered it. Thank you.
Board Member Sweat.
So I think that what has been important to me about this process is that as a board, we have continued to ask our administration to provide recommendations to us based on their expertise and knowledge. And I believe that that's what's happened, with this, is that they have followed that due diligence and taken the direction that we gave to them. I think that at the time when we created this, as the superintendent has pointed out, it was a pilot program to fit a need during the pandemic. And all of us that were on the board at that time understood that. I also believe that there is a true, genuine effort from our administration and from our staff to take care of these families and children and to provide them the best opportunity outside of what we can no longer provide to them. And so for me, as I look at this, I think that I appreciate the work and thought that's gone behind the recommendation that we see up in front of us tonight, and want to honor that as we've asked them to do that for us in the past. So I feel comfortable, and also I appreciate Superintendent Bates, you saying, is there some additional things that we could give direction about? And I think that as you come back to us, and if there's other things that come up, that we need to address and help with, that we should be open to that. So I just wanted to say that I'm comfortable with where we're at tonight, and to be able, and I think that Mr. Lim knows I have great respect for him and for the teachers and the families that have been in this program for the past 2 years, but I also want them to have the opportunity for a more robust opportunity than what we can provide for them at this point.
Board Member Jensen.
Well, I would echo what Christy has said, but I also appreciated when I was looking at 3 how you had indicated that you would make it so that there would be a window open for those families to submit a school choice application. And I think that kind of ties to what Dr. Bates is saying also with time considerations when we talk about the 26. I'm just thinking as my experience in schools, those schools need to know if they're going to be getting additional students. And I'm relying on an assurance that those children, if they make a school choice application, that it really will be considered and that they really will have the greatest opportunity to go to the school that they would choose and that their parents would want them to be in. So I appreciate your including that, and I think that that's another reason that we need to move forward.
Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Board Member Anderson.
I'll just add to that. I mean, I think no one wants to move forward with recommendations that, make anyone feel any of these feelings, because we do respect Principal Lim and Ms. Stock, who's here, and Ms. Moore, who was here previously, and the amount of work that they have done. And we also know, about our declining enrollment elsewhere and the rest of the pathway we have with schools. So no one wants to do that. And I think with the information given, I would just reiterate that maybe it is the most equitable option to offer the virtual alternative that won't have to consolidate, that won't have to be more limited to asynchronous, that can continue synchronously to the extent possible. And so knowing, the many complex feelings people have about this, I would move that we accept the staff's recommendation as written here, and knowing that these additional opportunities will be shared with families and faculty as well.
I'll second.
Is that a formal motion?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Would you please restate the motion, Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, that we would accept the motion, or we would accept the recommendation of staff as written here, with the additional opportunities for communicating with families and faculty.
About dual enrollment?
About dual enrollment, the approval of the enrollment window, all of them outlined here, as well as dual enrollment. Let me say that one more time.
Thank you.
I would move that we accept the staff recommendations here, as well as the opportunities to additionally communicate with families about the window for open enrollment, returning to their neighborhood school, and dual enrollment.
I second.
We have a motion on the table. It's been seconded by Board Member Sweat. Motion by Board Member Anderson. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, no.
Jenny Sika, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you so much for the discussion. Ken, teachers, thank you so much for all of your efforts, and we look forward to seeing all the brilliant things that you do in different roles and capacities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Moving on to our second discussion item, agreement concerning the funding, implementation, and administrative programs involving police officers in schools. Executive Director of Policy and Legal Services, Christina Kindle.
Hey. So as some of you may know who've been here for a number of years, this has been a work in progress for the past 3 years. Over the past 3 years, we've been working with the city and the police department to come up with a fully negotiated agreement and receive input from the city in terms of changes they would like to see in the police department. One of the things that our district administrators really wanted to see and was their primary goal in making amendments to this agreement was the ability for SROs to assist with trespassers on school campuses, including students who were not assigned to that particular school coming onto a different school campus and starting fights or assaulting people. That was something that they felt really strongly about, and the city and police department were very receptive to those changes, and those are incorporated into this agreement. This agreement also created a ad hoc committee, which will look at the various data that new legislation is requiring the school district to collect with regard to student discipline and citations and referrals to court. We have a lot of new responsibilities that are going into effect this year, and the committee is going to look at it in the upcoming year after we've gathered all that data and look at how the SRO partnership might be improved by looking at that data. And the report will go to the superintendent of schools, the mayor of Salt Lake City, and the chief of police of the police department. And in terms of other changes to the agreement that was made based from the prior version, it's been reformatted quite a bit to be easier to read by the public. Hopefully it's, and it although it's quite long, I think it reads, the flow is much better. It also, because of the time lag in getting this updated, it removed a lot of outdated code citations. We took out a lot of, hopefully, the legalese related to internal Salt Lake City Police Department procedures. But it is fully compliant with the current statutes on what is required to be in an MOU between a school district and a police department for SRO services. It is also fully compliant with our settlement agreements related to an incident we had several years ago, and we negotiated a settlement agreement with the ACLU and the family. And so this agreement was originally drafted by the district with the ACLU and the Attorney General's office, so some of those critical provisions remain in the contract. But I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about it that you might have. And just so you are aware, just at a fundamental base level, if we do have SROs in our school buildings, we are required to have an MOU with the police department for the provision of those school resource officers. And we are required to outline the roles and responsibilities of the various parties, including clearly articulating that SROs are not involved in the discipline of students, that is the sole responsibility of administrators in the school. And also outlining all the various training components that our administrators and SROs will undertake both jointly and separately. So, any questions?
Member Jensen.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the work that you have put into this and the others. I think it's really very timely that this has come to us, especially in light of an incident that we had in a high school just prior to the end of the school year. I've received lots of emails with parents concerned about weapon detectors, and it was nice that Superintendent Bates was able to announce the time frame for that, and that we will be able to have those in our high schools at the beginning of the year. But I have also had parents question if there are opportunities for SROs in schools, and I think that this demonstrates that there are, and now there's a document that explains how that will occur. My one question would be is, how will we make, I mean, I've had emails from the media, all sorts of people asking about this. How will we make this so that the public's aware of what's being arranged or agreed to between the district and, you know, these entities? That's one question. And then the second question is, under Section 2A, point 12, it said that there would be school trainings. So does that mean that, like in our schools, there would be a day where there was an assembly or something like that where the students are going to be instructed, or How will that occur? I mean,
okay.
I just think that that would be really helpful.
So that particular section refers to trainings that would be given to faculty and
I saw
administrators
that.
on
Mhm.
like de-escalation techniques and what is appropriate to be handled at the administrator or school level regarding discipline and codes of conduct. And this is specifically saying that SROs would be invited to attend those and that they should attend those if they're available to attend. But clearly some of those exact topics in terms of de-escalation and responsibilities for discipline, which again, as I said, SROs are not responsible for, that will all be gone over in the administrator and SRO joint training that we're having prior to the beginning of the school year. And we will additionally be holding other trainings as part of the, what used to be called GAM, what's it called now? The DLC meetings that administrators have monthly that Dr. Taylor leads with his staff. So our plan is to have additional trainings that would be where SROs would be invited to cover more topics that aren't just initially covered at the initial training. But there are definitely trainings at the school, and the idea would be for the SRO who's assigned to that school to interact with the faculty and staff at that school so they're all hearing the same message and they're all on the same page. In terms of communicating it out for families, I would rely on Yandri Chatwin in terms of how to communicate that best out, what she thought was the best approach for that. Also, I'm sending out a newsletter that goes to administrators and all the employees relating to the new policy that was passed, and this is a required attachment to that, so at least all our employees would know about it that way, and it would always be an attachment to the policy that the public has access to on our district webpage.
And there is a board report that's prepared and sent out a few days after every board meeting, and this would be discussed in that board report. That goes to the whole community, not just to employees.
Thank you. Board Member Anderson.
I think that it's wonderful that MOU responds to a lot of the issues that have happened at sites. So like that section 10 that allows, SROs to address students who aren't enrolled. That's really helpful. The questions I have mostly are about the negotiation with the city in terms of the financing of this, and also how and whether they're able to staff SROs the way this is written. And I don't know if that's necessarily within your purview to answer or not. So I don't want to launch into my questions if you want to say that's not on me, because
I'll let business administrator Kearsley answer the financing part.
Okay.
In terms of the staffing part, Superintendent Bates and I have had many conversations with the city regarding the staffing of the SRO partnership, and clearly there's a minimum staffing currently that's anticipated for our schools, with the expectation that as more staff become available, the city understands our significant request for additional SROs up to the level of 10 that we have had previously, and that's really where our hope is to get. And we have been assured by city officials that they understand that goal and would be working towards it, correct?
That is correct.
And so before you answer, I would just say specifically that right above the section for conduct at students who aren't enrolled, in section 9, it's numbers 1 through 5. Most of the scholarly research shows that nurses and social workers have a lot of efficacy in those areas. So I guess acknowledging that SROs are a part of school, I wonder why, when there's a lot of turnover in the positions and the way it's written, the Salt Lake City Police Department can't necessarily staff these, why so much district money goes to fund it rather than city money funding that and us funding things we know also achieves these goals is sort of where I have frustration.
Right. So the financial arrangements are the same. They've been with the police department for, as far as I know, which is a long time, where we pay half of the salary and benefits and the city pays the other half. And again, we only pay the half of the actual SROs that are staffed. So it's not a fixed amount. If they're not staffing the full allotment, we only pay for the half that they actually do staff. So we hadn't requested any changes in those financial arrangements in this iteration of the MOU.
Student Board Member Bay.
If we're not staffing the full amount of like officers, where does the money go?
Yeah, so that money is not spent. It's just held into fund balance.
Any other additional thoughts or questions?
Sorry. I would just say if it's being held that way and we know there are other roles we could fill that do these things, I'm obviously supportive of the way it's written to comply with all of the things that, Christina is making this comply with. But I do think it's our job to make sure the functions of this, oh, mercy, are being fulfilled.
Alan?
And that might not necessarily be through police officers. That one of the ways we do this is by funding more social workers and school nurses on sites that make a big difference in these areas. So it's not, for me, my issue is not the legal ramifications of this and compliance. It's what we are doing with the money for those outcomes for students.
I could thank you, Board Member Anderson, and I'll just say that I have some mixed emotions. I followed closely, the legislation that Representative Hollins put forward in coordination with the school board a number of years ago, the iterations of the first MOU that was developed between the city and the police department. And I see a lot of value. I think my mixed emotions are tied to just about every comment that was made by my colleagues tonight. Yes, there's a significant need for safety in our schools. And I've always been somewhat disenfranchised that the department hasn't been able to meet the quotas and the staffing requirements. And I say that with a caveat that, do I believe that police officers are the only answer? No. I think a lot of what we've talked about tonight, social emotional learning, making sure that our environments are inclusive, that they're welcoming for students, having brilliant and highly qualified teachers. I'm looking at Mike and James over here. It's like a spider web of supports that hold safety together. And I agree with you, Board Member Anderson, about the impact that social workers and nurses can have, but I'm also reminded of some of the initial foundations of this legislation and what we're seeing today, which is that you have disproportionate minority contact with law enforcement, which increases a student's or a child's likelihood of being incarcerated at some point in their life. And I think the legislation, what we're trying to get at in this agreement and previous agreements, is that developing a positive relationship between law enforcement and students can have the adverse effect of making it less likely that students and children would be on that pathway to incarceration. So there's the other part that I'm somewhat frustrated by with the history of this, is that I agree with that. I think we should have positive and strong relationships between our students and between law enforcement. I think it provides a different level of relationship outside of our schools and in the communities as well, which I think is really, really important. And I'm saying that for a lot of different reasons. One, my connections and family members who are law enforcement officers, some of whom are just some of the best people that I know, right? But again, I know they're not the sole answer, and I really hope that over the course of this year, as it's outlined in this MOU, that we can really reevaluate what it would mean to bring more SROs into the mix, especially with the increase of funding opportunities the department's had over the last 2 years with the city council, an unprecedented budget that was just approved in the city. I think that our children, if there's one thing that brings our two institutions closer together, it should be our children, it should be our students and the community. So I'd really love to figure out how and what that might look like over the course of the next year. And I guess my question after my little soapbox there is, under one purpose, which is through this agreement, the parties intend to accomplish the following, which includes a lot of the elements that were on my thoughts of mixed feelings about this. But how are we going to measure and demonstrate that we're accomplishing A through E of that section?
So I will say that one of the main provisions of this contract that was part of the settlement agreement was the creation of an oversight committee that takes public feedback in terms of complaints or criticisms of the SRO partnership. It also looks like at all the data related to how the partnership is functioning, and that committee is made up of representatives from all the various levels of schools, so a high school administrator, a middle school administrator, elementary school administrator. Dr. Buendia leads that. It has city officials and members of the mayor's office on that committee. It also has members of the police department, and the public is invited to attend that as well. Notice is given. And so we're taking a lot of different data points and looking at that to examine how well the partnership is functioning. That's also the one of the responsibilities of the new ad hoc committee, is to really look at that new data that we will be collecting through all the new legislative requirements, and see whether or not any of that data articulates a way to improve this partnership in the agreement. That is something that we would expect to be in the report that's given to the three individuals that I indicated last time, but it really is sort of a data-driven and stakeholder feedback-driven analysis of whether or not we're meeting the purpose and the goals of this agreement. And that committee, the oversight committee, meets twice a year. So it really should be a critical analysis of whether we're doing that. And one of the things Dr. Bates and I were very clear on was that we could extend the term of the ad hoc committee if we thought it was beneficial and they were coming back with strong recommendations and a strong report to really make sure that this partnership is functioning the way everyone wants to, and in the best interests of our students and stakeholders on our district property.
Thank you. Board Member Sweat.
So I think that the conversations that we're having tonight about this MOU is so important, and Ms. Kendall, thank you for the work and everybody else that's been involved in this, the work that you've done around this. I think that one of the things that Ashley, that you said that resonates with me, that's one of the reasons why this board invested into more social workers, is because we understand that component of how important our social workers are in our schools. And so I think that we need to continue to do that. That still needs to be a priority. But I also think that as you look at this MOU, for me, as I look at it through my lens, some of the same things that you talked about, Nate, are the same things that I've thought about. The positive relationship is the reason why we wanted to have this MOU. We want kids to see our police department as somebody that they can go to, not run from. And so that, the relationships that we're building, K through 12 in our schools is so important. That's another reason why we have this robust training, that we've required and that we're asking for. I think that the oversight committee to me is a step forward. It's something that we need. It's something we need to measure with our outcomes. But I also think that, I hope as this committee gets together, it expands and looks at and asks for teacher and student voice. Because I think that if we're not serving the community within the school the way that it should be served, then we need to make some changes. But the partnership is how you make the changes together in a positive way. So I think that, from the beginning of knowing that we needed to have a stronger MOU, we needed to have a better partnership with our police department and city, that we're moving in the right direction.
And I will say,
just appreciate the work that's going.
And I will say that as part of that ad hoc committee, any of the parties it's specifically listed that any of the parties can invite a parent or a student to be part of that ad hoc group. And certainly the new superintendent, Dr. Grant, is here, has heard your feedback, because it will be up to the new superintendent to appoint the 3 committee members for that ad hoc committee. They aren't specifically designated in here. It's up to the 3 leaders in those various entities to assign the people. But then there's also the opportunity to add in a parent or student voice to that, because my understanding is that the student and parent voice was something that was very important, that came out of the CREP committee's recommendations in terms of looking at the partnership agreement.
Board
I appreciate everyone's input. The SRO subject is really very sensitive in so many ways. The reason I say so, just because of my personal incidents, and I would call them inadvertent incidents, or whatever, who knows, with the police officers in my neighborhood, or just like drive-in, or whatever it might be. And, I wish I could, explain to you what it feels like when you are a minority and, you're just walking in the park and, how a police officer would look at you, versus like if I'm walking with my wife who is white and how we would be looked at. Or like if I'm in my house and chasing my kids and 3 police officers would knock on my door and asking, how are my kids? Are they all right? But because of my wife's white privilege, she was able to go in there and talk to them. And guess what? They didn't even come into the house to inspect the kids. Why? Because my wife was able to use, who she is and her privilege to be able to communicate to those officers. Now, when I go into high schools or middle schools or so, and I see these police officers so heavily armed, as if they are guarding an entrance to a base. If I am a student in there who have and seen my parents dealing with these issues, how am I going to build that trust and relationship with these police officers? It doesn't matter how long and how much time they're going to come and talk to us and show us, until we see a certain, adjustment. One, with let's just start with how they are dressing. That's one. 2, let's also, those money that we are using, they had more increase in their budget than our teachers and this and this and that than we had here at school. So I think we can, figure out a way that we can work with them in a way that they can, it's okay for you to have SROs if you want to have, as long as you can pay for them. And those money can be used towards so many things that we just talked about today. The 83% of students of color who are, dealing with behavioral issues, the 14% of special ed students who are dealing with these issues. Those are really the source of things, and the only way for us to be able to correct these things is if we us as a village, us as a community, and make sure that those students as well feel that they are one big community, take care of each other. Because a lot of times when I go to the building out there to east or walk by west or so, the police officers are 90% of the time I'm there, they're just chatting. They're just chatting. And now we are about to have weapon detectors in our high schools, and what are they going to do next? We're going to hire people who will be monitoring those weapon detectors. What is going to happen next? Those are a lot of money we are paying. Let me tell you something. I have utmost great respect to police officers. I have a great relationship with the chief of police, great relationship with the chief of the UHP, and so on and so on. But also they can see it from the lens of us as those who are minorities. When we walk into those buildings, it's just it's hard to explain. Unless you are in a position of this skin color, I don't think you'll ever understand what it feels like. Unless you are a person who get called on, the police get called on just because you're walking in your neighborhood, just because you are a black person, I don't know where else I can explain it. Please, I hope that we're all for the sake of those whom we represent as minorities in this district, we figure out a way that next year we figure out a way that we can invest those money in the better resources for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Any additional thoughts or questions? Member Anderson?
I would just say, I mean, based on the things that have been said, it seems like there is a general consensus with a lot of the compliance type of issues, but more information wanting to be reported at a given time. Is there a way within the committee structure to move to approve the MOU as written, but also decide today when we would hear about it again and exactly what we would hear and when we would talk again about negotiations for the future? Because I think there's a lot of consensus, but the desire to not like put a pin in it and then just hope for more information later.
I think there's a lot of feeling, and the things that are being said, I think, are really, really important. So I don't just want to put a pin in it, the way you've just said that. But keep in mind, this is an MOU for us to have police officers from the city. The other things that we're talking about really aren't part of this MOU. They're about how we want to do business internally. And by all means, board, tell us what things you'd like us to report on, what attitudes you'd like us to promote, what training you'd like us to give, because you're right on, and that's very appropriately the representative role that you should be playing in your interaction with the administration. Absolutely. But I just want to be clear, that's separate from a contract with the police department to have so and so many officers in our schools, and that they have thus and such training, and that they have these reports and that an oversight committee reviews. Those are pieces that are in the law that we're required to have. The other things you're describing, to include in any given year money that's not spent, that had been budgeted but that's not spent in the next year, that should, I mean, those are perfectly appropriate conversations for us to have, for the board to have, and give direction to the administration. But that level of specificity just wouldn't be appropriate for an MOU between the district and the city and the police department.
Except for the salary, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
that's where the hitch in the giddy up is that if we approve it, we're approving this salary, and the money going toward this and our percentage of the money is where some of the tension lies.
I think
So-
the way, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the way this is written in this iteration doesn't designate a specific number of officers, but says, so a sergeant, where in years past it said 10, and 10 weren't provided, 10 were budgeted for but not provided, and so there were monies that were left unspent that went into the fund balance. In this iteration, what's budgeted is what they'll be providing, and so there won't be additional budget unless the board were to say, we do want to budget for 10 because we have confidence in the commitment of the mayor that that's the goal, and so we'll get there when we get there. And until we get there, we'd like the money that's unspent for those 10 that we have budgeted to be spent in this manner. So that's a wholly appropriate conversation to have.
Board Member Jensen?
The reason that I brought up the question about parents and students, and it was getting to just what Nate and many of you have talked about, having a positive experience with the police, and I guess I'm thinking about it on a grade school level. I mean, that's where my background is. And I have seen really wonderful opportunities where children haven't had exposure to the police, and the police come and they bring their, and I mean, there are wonderful books about police dogs and how they're trained, and they come with their police dogs. And Nate, you said your family members, so you can have a diverse group of officers come, that it's not just a white police officer or I mean, talking about the elephant in the room, I guess, but those are really...
We also have female SROs.
That's right, and those female officers come, and I'm just remembering one where the things that she had this dog do was incredible. But what I was trying to say is when you look in, I think it's section 7, it talks about how the SROs are really, they're focusing on high schools and middle schools. And I mean, I understand that, but then it said that, they can be allocated to elementary schools. I would just hope that there would be a way that, because sometimes it's hard to get them to come. I mean, they've got a lot of things doing, and I think, or a lot of things that they are doing. And I think it would be really helpful for elementary schools to be able to call and say, we'd really like you to be here to have a day.
And I think
and that's what I was talking about.
And I think as our numbers go up of SROs, I think those opportunities will definitely increase. But certainly that's in there now, and that definitely goes to the triad approach of all the aspects of an SRO, that it's not just law enforcement activities, it's being a counselor, it's being a positive role model, it's providing instruction in various areas.
All right. I think we've had a really robust conversation. Thank you, Ms. Kindle and Board Superintendent B.A. Kearsley, for all the insights that you brought to the discussion. In closing of this portion, before I ask for a motion, I would just ask that that this MOU be executed with fidelity. I've heard a lot of stories about grumblings about trainings and who does them and how often and are they meaningful or not. And I think you just have to look at our 20,000 students and let that be your benchmark for how meaningful everybody that's involved and tied to this MOU of being on the same page. And while I'm only one of 7, I hope that the vote tonight solidifies the significance of what is required on our end and what is required on the city and the police department's end to really, one, be partners and also look out for the best interest of our schools and our students and families. With that, I'll seek a motion from the board to move this to the action agenda item.
I move that we move the agreement concerning the funding, implementation, and administrative programs involving police officers in school to our action agenda.
There, second. We had a motion from Board Member Sweat and a second from Board Member Jensen to move the funding for the SRO MOU agreement to the action agenda. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, no.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Follow our precedent and move this last remaining discussion item to the action agenda. I would look for another motion to approve the MOU as presented and discussed.
Move to approve the MOU for the SROs.
We have a motion from Christy. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Second from Brian. All right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question about that. So looking at that number 15, the reimbursement by school district section, that's what I'm unclear on when we would hear about that again, which changes, whether or not I would be more or less supportive, because it's the reimbursement part and what we're putting into it compared to the city that I take issue with. So is there a time of year in which we would naturally expect to hear about that being renegotiated?
Is that a question for B.A. Kearsley?
Sorry.
Ms. Kindle?
So this is a 3-year agreement. So if the board gave direction to me to renegotiate that provision, that's something that Business Administrator Kearsley and I could go into the next round of negotiations with and address that. But
not for 3 years.
That's the term of the agreement. I mean, I guess if the board asked for us to try and renegotiate it for the next year, we could, but 100% that this term is what's in there currently. So even if we renegotiated it and they didn't agree to it, we would still be bound to it for the next 3 years. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have a motion on the table. Any further discussion or questions to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for a roll call vote, starting with myself. Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, no.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, no.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you, everybody involved, Ms. Kindle, Jennifer Newell from the mayor's office. Please thank all the representatives from the city and the C-Rep committee as well. B.A. Kearsley in your department, Christy, thank you so much. That concludes our discussion and action agendas. Superintendent, do you have a report?
I do. Number of things that were close to my heart. I said earlier while I was tying a tie, you were all present for that. But one additional matter. Based on the board's policy, a couple weeks from 2-3 weeks in July anyway, Brian Conley will be coming to the board. Brian's met with regarding boundary and population study. Brian's met with all of the elementary school community councils, and then there is also a follow-up after those community council meetings with principal and school community council chair. And have you completed all of those, or you've got 2 left? Yeah. 2 left. So that'll be done. We're right back on the schedule where we had been prior to a mishap which happened earlier in the year. Now, per the policy, the school community councils, per the policy, the options committee has been working to come up with some different options to be brought to the board. You will see those options in July. Per the policy, prior to that board meeting, Brian will sit down with all of the principals and look at those and get their feedback, which will help shape the presentation to you on the 11th. As much confidence as I have in our folks, I believe that after Brian has that meeting with principals and others to show those options, with principals and SCC chairs, that you'll start getting phone calls with suggestions, pointed and otherwise, suggestions about what might happen, what might not happen. I would just strongly encourage you to do what you have been doing, and that is refer folks to Brian. And you might say something like, your feedback is so important, the whole board should hear what you've said, and so I encourage you to write that down and send it to Brian. Or, the feedback you've given is so important, I'm forwarding this email to Brian. And you can say with complete confidence that he is gathering and collating every comment that he has received and will receive, and will give those to you at that same meeting. The baseline comments that he's received already, and that the process will be in place where those documents, those folders get refreshed with additional comments. But it's going to be really important as the number of calls and queries escalate, or increase rather, and escalate, that you would send those to Brian in accordance with the policy, and that's what will keep the train on the tracks rather than derailed. So that's my report, my comment this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board member reports. Board Member Sweat, we'll start with you.
So I have a couple of things. I feel like every once in a while we have these really great teaching moments that happen in this room. And for me, one of the soapboxes that my colleagues know that I'm always on is just a caution around using one-time funds, because one-time funds leads to conversations that we had tonight, which was a pilot program that we started and then had to end. And every time we use one-time funds, as Mr. Kearsley knows, looking at our ESSER, there's going to be hard decisions that are made. So it's a teaching moment for all of us to think about as we go forward and we use our resources, how we use them, if they're ongoing funds or one-time funds, or if we have to look at possibly ending a program. The other thing is that this is the first time in 20 years that I've missed graduation. And it was hard not to be there with all of you, but I just so appreciate all the amazing photographs that were put up, on your own personal pages, and then also the things that Yandri, posted, because even though I wasn't there, I felt like, I was. And so thank you for being there for me and for cheering on kids and shaking hands. And it's just one of the greatest nights that we get as school board members. And if you happen to have a child or a neighbor that walks across that stage and you get to shake their hand, it's just so gratifying, to be able to do that. So thank you to all of you for that. So I think that, sorry, I know I'm going to get emotional, but sometimes sad things happen in threes, right? And so 3 things have happened this past week that 3 great people who are part of the Highland family have passed away. And Bill Larson, who was an amazing dentist, Jim Parkin, who was an amazing doctor with ears, nose, and throat, both such staunch supporters of the Highland family, will be missed. And I will miss them. They were my neighbors and lived right in my little neighborhood. But also the loss of Dean Collette. It's just, that's the circle of life that happens, but he will be missed. He was certainly, a part of the Highland family from the very beginning. And all of us have Dean Collette stories, right, Martin? We all have Dean Collette stories. And so this Friday at 8 p.m. in the stadium, there's going to be a tribute, to Dean. And if you're so inclined to come, we would love to have anybody come and join us on Friday night.
Thank you, Christy. Board Member Jensen.
Well, I have a couple. First of all, I do have some news that I need to report to you from the USBA, the Utah School Board Association. Well, first of all, I guess I should start with, for the public in general, we need to remind them that public comment is open for the Utah State Board of Education core standards. And this is your opportunity to, public, if you're watching, this is your opportunity to give comments. Then for us as a board, I just want to remind you of dates that are important for us. First of all, on August 25th, that is the pre-delegate assembly. And Jonathan Ball and Ben Leishman have been invited to speak. And these 2 individuals have an incredible amount of influence with the legislature. I would really encourage you to be there to hear them, because I think that they can give you, and these are individuals that they're not political, okay? They can give you ideas on how to approach the legislature. Then the pre-delegate assembly is the 25th, and then the delegate assembly is the 26th. So I'm reminding you, and that would start at 9 a.m. Of those 2 important dates. Then I also wanted to, there's a leadership academy for some of you, and that will be September 7th through the 9th. And there's 3 people per district. So we need to look at that.
Let me just add into that. They talked about that if anybody wants to go, we should sign up, and that we would be put on a waiting list so that if any positions came open, then we would be able to fill those positions, those spots as they came open. So to sign everybody up if we want to, and then
right,
identify the 3, that should go. The suggestion was certainly the superintendent and possibly the newest board members. That's one of the things we talked a little bit about.
Finally, one of the things that the Utah School Board Association is looking at is the Dignity Index. And this is something that has been used across the country to help us learn, again, how to be civil and kind to one another. So I want to encourage you to look at the Dignity Index and get ideas. Finally, I had a wonderful opportunity of going to those graduations, and I want to thank Martin. In conjunction with that, we were at graduations together. I want to thank you, Martin, for taking what I'm going to call an opportunity to come and serve as our interim superintendent. It was an opportunity for us. I hope it was an opportunity for you, and I appreciate
Oh, it was an opportunity.
A grand opportunity.
But I appreciated being there with you at Highland High and singing our school songs. And Dean Collette, well, he was there when you were there. He was there when I was there. And it was wonderful to be at East and Highland and to shake hands with those children that I've known their whole lives. Thanks, Martin.
Member Anderson?
Yeah, so school is out of session, so I've heard a lot less from families and students, but the constant message from my neighborhood is asking me what's happening with the West High rebuild. So because we know the next step is studying bonding, I just want to encourage us again to discuss sooner rather than later what that path looks like, not just for West, but also the communities in Highland and the Glendale neighborhood that probably want that information. In a similar vein, I wanted to thank Jennifer Newell and also Hannah Barton at the city who've taken the baton on some community concerns, such as the Wasatch Tunnel and the safe traffic patterns at West, and I appreciate them doing that. I've also been working on the Battle of the Books for next year, and I'm down 3 of 20 if anyone wants to join me in doing that. I will also say, thank you to Martin for all of his service, specifically telling me at graduation that I did not have to shake people's hands if I didn't want to. I could offer another mode of congratulations, so I was very appreciative of that. And it really is. It's just you feel really seen, so thank you so much, and we will miss you.
Student Board Member May.
Yeah, I have a few more thoughts. I talked earlier. So I just graduated a few weeks ago, and first of all, thank you for the board members who attended and for all of the work that went into that, corralling all the kids. I saw April there, and she was helping. She gave me a hug as I walked by. It was really nice. Thank you to the teachers, staff, and admin for providing such a wonderful school experience for the past 13 years. Thank you to the students of the district for sharing with me your passion, your kindness, and your friendship, and for allowing me to represent you. It's been an honor. Thank you to the board for putting up, or with my candor, and being open and asking for the student voice. I think it's really important. As the district considers and works through the challenges ahead, like the mental health crisis, declining enrollment, and potential school rebuilds, I encourage you to continue centering students' right to a great education. And I know that you'll tackle the challenges ahead with grace. Serving on this board has been a wonderful privilege. Thank you so much, everyone. The West motto is once a Panther, always a Panther, but I'd like to extend that and say once a Salt Lake City School District student, always a Salt Lake City School District student.
Amen.
Vice President Williams.
I always hate going after Lydia because she's just so eloquent and has the great things to say, but I just wanted to share out about graduation as well. And Christy, it was hard not having you there. I know you were missing it. Although a few of us spent 14 hours in the Huntsman Center that day, it was really great to see the traditions and the speakers and the performances. Just truly is one of my favorite things about being a board member. And then I went home and slept for several hours. But I did want to share my appreciation first to Lydia. It really has been such a great experience sitting next to you and hearing what you have to say and doing that from the student perspective. I greatly appreciate that, so thank you. And to Martin as well. just want to, I can't even say, but I just really appreciate you, and thank you for coming in, and there are a lot of lessons that I can't even tell you that I've learned from you, so thank you.
Mohammed?
Well, first of all, to all of our black brothers and sisters, happy Juneteenth, or in this case, I would say happy Freedom Day. Yesterday I had the honor of going to the city building and help in the process of raising the flag. What an amazing experience, really, just so amazing. And yeah, just like it was heartwarming to see that happening for sure. And Dr. Bates, or let me see, my brother. My goodness, you know, words are not enough to express to you my sincere gratitude for everything you have done. You know, I could list them, and we're not going to finish on time here. Don't list them, okay? Are you sure? Okay, good. But I really, really want to say thank you so much for everything, your service, the time you put in to make sure our district keeps moving forward, and also the time you put in to make sure that us as a board, we continue to unite and come together. And also, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to your wife, you know, and for everything she has given up and sacrificed so you can be present here for us, you know, not just 12 hours a day, but it's 24/7. I sincerely appreciate that. Lydia, my friend, first of all, I am so proud of you. And it takes courage and a tenacity to put your name forward and want to represent the 20+ thousand students here in this large district. I'm so proud of you, and you know, you have spoken and your words were heard, and I've received, you know, calls, letters, texts, emails from students, you know, reflecting what you talked about. And also, you know, your words helped us also in the process of making a great selection of our new superintendent. And words are not enough to express that. Now you're about to begin a new chapter in your life, so keep pressing forward. You have great things out there to do. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my goodness. If I may, just like in Arabic, let people know as well that this is your last day here. إخوتي أخوات، من المعلوم على أن دكتور بيت وستودنت بورد التلميذة ليديا اليوم هو اليوم الأخير لهم هنا في مدارسنا، وأود أن أشكرهم جزيل الشكر بكل المساعدات التي قدموها لكل من التلاميذ الذين يوجدون في مدارسنا هنا. وأنا بمبادلة لكم أود أن أشكرك جزيلا كل الشكر على كل المساعدات التي قدمتها لمدارسنا هنا، ونشكركم جزيل الشكر.
Thank you, Mohammed. Jenny?
I have a report.
Nice.
So, just a recognition that should have been recognized a couple of board meetings ago, but I had to go through the process of understanding what it meant. But Meadowlark, which is in my precinct, accomplished the feat of overcoming the CSI. And they've, I guess that program, they went through the process and they've accomplished that. And I didn't realize that until a few board meetings where I had to finally understand what accomplishments that or processes that they had to go through. And I think that's a massive accomplishment that the school district should recognize, especially the dynamic of my precinct, because I think, you know, there's a few schools that will be going through such things. They attribute a lot of their success through this family collaboration thing that was recently let go of. That's part of my report as well is, we have a couple of schools in my precinct who vow that there will no doubt be a turnaround because of these family collaborators that have been, placed elsewhere. So I'm pretty sure that the district is doing something about that, or place them in a position, or hopefully will do some type of justice in trying to maintain or help offer the resources to these individual schools so that they continue to head in the right direction of not falling back into the CSI program or continuing to progress further. What else did I have? I did also attend the graduation, and I would also like to recommend that we go to a COVID graduation so we don't have to speak at all at any of them. So, I think one of my kids went through COVID graduation, and I tell her, and she brags about it often, how that was the best graduation ever. One of 3 of my kids had the COVID graduation, and by far I enjoyed it because it was strictly about that student. And I didn't have to speak. But also at the same note, it does bring a lot of joy to my heart and my whole personal persona as I see and watch these kids, no matter what the story they bring. I can envision myself, because I never got the opportunity to walk and receive my diploma in the Salt Lake City School District. That came later because of a lot of choices and a lot of influences that I did back in my days. But it's such a joy to see full circle as these children walk up and receive this diploma. And, I jokingly, me and my friends jokingly say, like, it's something that you have to do, is graduate from high school. But knowing a lot of kids from my neighborhood and empathizing with that, it's a huge accomplishment. So other than that, Dr. Bates, Martin, I'm going to miss you. I will. You've turned this place around the past few years that I have been in this seat of board membership. There has been a morale lift, not only in the district, but as board members, a camaraderie that you were able to assist and bring for us to be able to work together and progress in a short manner of months that you have been here. And thank you for doing that. Lydia, I have no doubt that you'll continue to lead and do great things in your future. And unfortunately, my kids receive the wrath of me always sharing, gosh, these board member kids that come and participate, and they just roll their eyes like, okay, not everybody could be like those kids. But there's something amazing, and there's so much truth to the chosen generation and what you guys do. It continues to amaze me, and I'm grateful and hopeful for our future, especially in this school district. Other than that, Dr. Grant, welcome. I'm ready for ya. I'm ready to support you. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you much.
Thank you, Jenny. I will say, I think that was longer than your graduation speech.
Yes, it was.
So well done. No, but seriously, I think just to round things off, the only report that I have is that I had the opportunity to attend the Salt Lake County Parks and Recreation Board meeting. Nothing really of significance for our district in that discussion or in that meeting, but a lot of really cool opportunities for our families and community members that live either inside of Salt Lake City boundaries or outside of Salt Lake City boundaries. A lot of really cool new trails are being developed in the Harriman and South Jordan area around the Kennecott copper mine as well. So stay tuned for a lot of those really cool grand openings of new trails and hiking opportunities, equestrian opportunities, and so on. Overall, just a huge thanks. I don't want to spend too much more time on the things that were said, but Lydia, thank you for all your efforts. Martin, thank you for everything that you've done as well. And ultimately, thank you to all of our teachers, all of our support staff, buildings and grounds, all of our food service individuals, our bus drivers, our cabinet members, the board for a successful school year. Really, really is an awesome thing that we do every single year. Looking forward to next school year and continuing on the great work that we have accomplished this year with Dr. Grant. So thank you so much. I will call the meeting adjourned.
Interlaced. My elementary school debate partner went to Really? I liked it. Oh, yeah, she went to school.
Getting a little low. Below half.
Hey, that wasn't me, only me, it was all of you guys.